Hello and welcome to the Scholar Progenium. Today we've got a very straightforward video. We're simply going to go through the Sanguinary Discipline, see which ones are good, which powers aren't so good, and why this is the case. So we'll dive straight in. Number one is the Quickening. The Librarian channels his psychic might, and the deadly powers of the Immaterium flow through him, raising his speed to deadly height. Now this is an absolute classic. It's been good for a couple of Sanguinary Disciplines now. It has a warp charge value of 6, which I believe is down. I think it was 7 last codex, which is great to have that drop. And until the start of your next psychic phase, so it carries all the way through, which is great. Some of these powers don't do that anymore. But you get these in your combat phase and in your opponent's. Well, you can reroll advance and charge rolls made for the Psyker. Of course, not going to be that useful in your opponent's advance and charge phase, but the other thing is you get D3 to the Psyker's attack characteristic. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're taking this on a Librarian Dreadnought, on Mephiston himself, or if you decide to spam Psykers and you've taken an additional Psyker or something like that. The Quickening is always useful to have. Rerolling advance and charge, brilliant. And considering most of the time you're going to have a Mephiston or a Dreadnought, a Librarian Dreadnought, you're going to want these guys in combat. You're going to be, taking an expensive unit. I think the Librarian Dreadnought's around 145. Mephiston might even be 150-ish right now. Either way, they're both around the 150 point mark. You don't want these to be up in the enemy's face and fail those charges, and you don't want them hanging around, not being able to get where they need to be. So for me, Quickening, absolute top tier. Love this power. Auto include 5 out of 5 for me. Unleash Rage is number 2 on the list. The Librarian reaches into the minds of his fellows and stokes the fires of anger lurking in their psyches, pushing them into a frenzied rage. Now this is a blessing. Unleash Rage has a warp charge value of 6. So pretty straightforward, you're going to get this off most of the time. If manifested, select one friendly Blood Angel's core unit within 12 inches of this side. This is basically everyone. And you really wouldn't use it on like a single character anyway. And until the start of your next psychic phase, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, an unmodified hit roll of 6 scores 1 additional hit. So exploding 6s. 6s count for extra hits. Brilliant, on the face of it. But for me, this is not as great a power as it at first seems, and I'll tell you why. Now, it's not because of the warp charge value of 6. Obviously, that's very castable. It's not the fact that it's only core units, because you'll probably be you wanting to use this on core most of the time. The problem with this is that I feel like it gives us almost overkill, and if we're relying on it as part of our build, then we're doing the wrong thing. We're setting our units up to not be able to look after themselves. So you're going to be, deep striking units in, or disembarking units, or running units up the field. However you're going to do it, you're going to be getting units into combat. Of course, you're a Blood Angel. So getting extra attacks on 6s seems great, but the thing is, we're an elite force, and we don't gamble with whether we're going to wipe a unit out or not. We don't do multiple rounds of combat. We destroy stuff, we wreck face, in one round of combat, we charge in, we kill it. Maybe a couple of scraps remaining, means we can't be shot at, we finish them off in their turn, jobs are good and standard. We don't take units that can't do that, so this power kind of gives units overkill. It gives them more than they need, because they're bringing the toys and the powers and the number of attacks that they need with them to do the job that they're going to do. I'm not saying this isn't useful. If a unit has been degraded, your Psyker can get them running on all cylinders again. It can get more juice out of your Sandguard, your Vanguard veterans, your Death Company, or any unit that's taken a few blows in combat. It can get them cooking as if they had the full number of models with a few extra attacks. Especially with a unit like Death Company, where maybe round 3, you're getting 5-6 attacks on model, depending on whether you've got chain swords or power weapons or whatever. And so almost every one of those Death Company, give or take, is going to get an extra bonus hit, which is absolutely brilliant. You can't argue with that. So it is really useful in some circumstances, but you've got your Psyker, probably Mephiston or Librarian Dreadnought, and they're going to be involved in the action. And there's a chance that these guys will die before this power really becomes useful. So for me, you're sort of holding on to a power. Now, it can be useful in some circumstances. Maybe you're playing the long game with your Psykers. You're looking to get up a Psychic Ritual or some Psychic Interrogation and using your Psyker as a midfielder to a backliner, something like that. So it's not out of the realms of possibility. And in those circumstances, Unleash Rage is good to have, because you can then you can do your job, you can cast your Psychic Ritual, you can do what you need to do, buff your surrounding units, that kind of thing. And you can get forward and cast this off and get your units firing on all cylinders, as I've said before, and give a really good boost to your units when they might start to flag. So it is certainly useful depending on what build you're going for and what you're trying to do with your Psyker. If you're not just using them as a big sledgehammer or support or assault unit. So Unleash Rage for me is just useful, but it's not something I'm going to be taking most of the time. Got to give it credit though, so it's a 3 out of 5 for me. Straight onto the Shield of Sanguinius, number 3 on the list. The Librarian wheels a shimmering golden barrier into existence, shielding his brothers from harm. The Shield of Sanguinius has a warp charge value of 6, so we're seeing a pattern here. Easily castable. If manifested, select one friendly Blood Angels unit within 18 inches of this Psyker. So this can affect characters that don't bring an invuln save, and other, but anything. It doesn't need to be core, basically, which is nice. Until the start of your next Psychic phase, models in that unit have a 5-up invulnerable save. Very straightforward. 6 to cast, useful. It depends on who you're facing. If you've got a lot of Sangard and they're not really the opponent's not going to be really topping AP -3, then this power is next to useless to you, because the majority of your elite force, if you've got 2 big units Sangard, are going to be taken from 2 + 3 or 4 5 up, and so their armor's bringing the protection with it. It doesn't need this buff. But on Death Company and units such as Gravis units, stuff like that, this can be an absolute clutch power. If you've got an expensive unit of, my mind's gone blank now, I don't want to say Incepts, but it's definitely not. The guys who drop down in Gravis armor with jetpacks and the plasma, if you've got a big unit of 6 of those and you cast this power on them, that is going to be a big problem for your opponent, because they're going to want to pour firepower into that unit, and it's a very competitive unit as it is, and it's going to take that much more, like 33% more, to kill it off. That's going to protect your assault forces, and it's going to make sure that you, across your whole army, take less damage. So it's really, really useful on a really scary unit that your opponent has no choice but to pour everything into until it's dead, because that basically is giving a 5-up to all your army until that unit's dead, if you think about it. So for me, I really love this power. There's lots of times when you just don't need it, but depending on your play, it can be absolutely ridiculously invaluable. So for me, I'm going to give the Shield of Sanguinius a solid 4 out of 5. It's not one I always take, but depending on my army list, it can be brilliant. Next on the list, we have Blood Boil. The Librarian drives his enemy's lifeblood into a seething frenzy, causing it to boil in the victim's veins a split second before bursting from every pore with explosive finality. Now, it sounds really cool. It's a Witchfire. Blood Boil has a warp charge value of 6, so again, we're seeing a pattern here. And in fact, no spoilers, but all of our powers are warp charge 6, so very easy to remember. Now, if manifested, select one enemy unit that is within 18 inches and visible to this Psyker. Now, I would love it if this was not visible, if it was anything, that even those that aren't visible. Because it'd be so useful for spamming units off like little bits of objectives, or hiding, holding a table quarter scoring, engaging all front, stuff like that. But you can't do it for that, so that's sad. Now, you roll 2d6. If the total is more than the highest toughness characteristic of models in that unit, it suffers D3 mortal wounds. Easily achievable. You've got 2d6. Most of the time you don't need to roll 4 or 5 on 2 dice, and you're going to do D3 mortal wounds. Perfectly respectable. You've then got, if the total is more than double the highest, then it's going to suffer a flat 3 mortal wounds. Now, this is, I can never decide how I feel about Blood Bowl. Sometimes I take it for a bit of fun, and I use it, and it pops someone's head, and I think it's absolutely great and hilarious and a brilliant power. And sometimes it's just not that useful, and it's a bit like, meh. The problem with it is that when you're casting Smite, for example, you cast your Smite, and then if you get it off and your opponent doesn't block it, you roll and you get your D3 mortal wounds. And sometimes you might even have a ceiling of D6 mortal wounds on rare occasions if you get more than 10 on the dice. Now, with Witchfire, not only do you have to roll to cast on a 6, but you also have to roll 2 dice, and there is a chance of messing it up. And if you're trying to spam the last couple of wounds off a really tough unit, then there's a very decent chance of messing it up. If you've got, let's say, I don't know, a knight on 2 wounds left and you think, oh, I'm going to go for it, there's a good chance you'll fail that because you need to get more than 8. So you've got basically a 75% chance of failing that because you've only got 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, not 75, but give or take. So it's not a great power. It's not really useful for getting those last couple of wounds off, whereas Smite, no problem whatsoever. The ability to do a flat 3 guaranteed to an elite unit in a weak, in a generally low toughness army is, however, brilliant. If you're facing against Incubi and you roll an 8 and you do 3 mortal wounds, that's going to be really welcome. And if you're just trying to clear a couple of guardsmen off an objective within 18 inches, you can basically do that with your eyes closed. This is almost guaranteed to work. So again, there's certain situations where it allows you to reach out and remove small weak units from the battlefield that your opponent is relying on to score. So Blood Boil is actually really useful against a really clever opponent that is going to use small units dotted around to rack up a lot of points for themselves. And it can really throw a spanner in the works. If they like to push things to the edge and they've got, just little scraps of units just running over the edge of a table quarter to grab engaging all fronts, or just sprinting up to an objective just to sit on it thinking, right, they're not going to be able to take me off that in one turn. And your Psyker can reach out and just pop those 2 models, you're good to go. So it can be really useful. It's one of those where I think actually the more you used it, and if you kind of just forced yourself to take Blood Boil for like 10 matches in a row, you'd become the master of Blood Boil. It'd be really useful because you can essentially select one unit. So the advantage obviously is, unlike Smite, which you're forced to pick the unit that's closer to you, this you can precisely pick any unit within 18 inches. You've got maneuverable Psykers because you've got Wings of Sanguinius, which we'll go on to in a second. Essentially, this allows you to really get around the board and just pick little bits off. So against certain opponents, absolutely brilliant. Again, most of the time, mediocre at best. So I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. Bloodlands, number 5. This is a power that we've had in the Sanguinary Discipline for ages. The Librarian conjures a mighty lance infused with his innermost rage. Hefting this empiric projectile, the Librarian hurls it with all of his psychokinetic might, sending it hurtling through the enemy ranks to maim and impale. And the visuals on that are sick. That is cool. Okay, no denying it. The Bloodlands has a warp charge value of 6, we know this. If manifested, select one enemy model that is within 18 inches of and visible to this Psyker. Draw the shortest possible line between this. I love how they have to specify that. Ooh, wiggly line. Through the Psyker's base and the selected enemy model's base or hull. Then roll 1d6 for each model the centre of the line passes over. On a 5-up, that model's unit suffers 1 mortal wound. It's just a bit meh. Okay? There's too many layers to it. If it was roll a d6 and on a 4-up, I'd be like, this is a good power. But, and you can of course have the chance to do a 5-up on a enemy character and do them a mortal wound, which could finish them off. But I mean, how many models does your opponent have to have in a line to rack up enough kills to make it worth it? I mean, if you do the maths on it, let's say Blood Boil, you get that off and you beat their toughness, and they're only toughness 3, so you're almost definitely going to double it and do your flat 3 mortal wounds. So you can almost definitely kill, let's say, a guardsman unit or some other toughness 3 unit by casting that d6, and you're probably almost definitely going to more than double. On a Bloodlands, you have to draw a line. They're going to, on a d6 for each model, the centre of the line passes over. So it needs to pass directly over, 6 guys, 7, 8, 9 guys to get the equivalent. So you have to draw a line through 9 guys. Now, with the way unit coherency works, and you're having to keep models of more than 5 units, has to have more than 2 models within 2 inches, and you get the drill. This isn't a tactics video on coherency, but the idea is that you're not going to get that. People aren't stringing long conga lines back to hold things. People have to keep their units together in a sensible fashion. I think it's great. I think it's brilliant. I think conga lining is stupid because I'm not a guardsman or a tyrannid or an orc. But the Bloodlance is really useful in that situation, because normally you could just line up a unit and just zap down the conga line, but that doesn't happen anymore. For me, Bloodlance is just meh. Please feel free to correct me. Feel free to tell me otherwise, but I think the opponent's horde would have to be so vast to make this actually worth casting that, in that 18-inch, for me, it's a no. Okay, so I'm just going to give it a straight up 1 out of 5. I don't think it's even situational. I think the Bloodlands is total trash tier. Please feel free to contradict me in the comment section. I'm more than happy to be illuminated. Okay, Wings of Sanguinius. Now, this was a little bit of a heartbreaker of a power when the book dropped, when the supplement dropped. A little bit disappointing with this one, but it's still an absolutely epic power, so I'll get into it. Blood red wings of psychic energy spring from the back of the librarian, allowing him to soar across the battlefield like an avenging angel. Wings of Sanguinius has a warp charge value of, you guessed it, 6. If manifested, this Psyker can make a normal move or fall back as if it were your movement phase. In addition, until the end of the phase, the Psyker has a move characteristic of 12 inches and the fly keyword. Now, why is this a heartbreaker? Sounds great. Well, because it used to be until the start of your next psychic phase, and this was so good for setting up murder time, because you used to cast it and you had a 12-inch fly in your next movement phase as well, just straight up. It was just brilliant. So you got a 12-inch move and a 12-inch fly. It was just the golden era of Wings of Sanguinius, undoubtedly. Now, these days, you only get it for that phase. You get a 12-inch and the fly keywords. It happens as if it were a normal move or a fallback. So you can't wings out of combat and then shoot normally if that were to be what you wanted to do with Mephiston's Plasma Pistol, for example. Plasma Pistol. But, essentially, you're restricted by all the normal things that you would be restricted by if you were moving, falling back. It's just as if you're moving in a movement phase. You basically get a free 12-inch move, and whilst you're doing that move, you count as flying, which is useful for getting over terrain and getting to where you need to be to pick stuff off. These days, it's all or nothing. You hit the Wings of Sanguinius and you're hitting the accelerator, going down again, smashing it. Do you know what I mean? Like the Wings of Sanguinius now, it's not a setup power, it's not a cunning power. It's I'm casting this, I'm getting in your face, I'm going to cast Quickening, I'm going to get an extra D3 attacks, I'm going to get a reroll advantage charge, I'm just going to wreck you. That's what Wings of Sanguinius is now. It's go time. It's Wings of go time. Now, for me, despite the changes and all of that, for me, Wings of Sanguinius is still an absolute auto-include. I could not imagine taking my main librarian, either the chief librarian, of course, himself, the chief, or that's Mephi to anyone else, and then also, obviously, if your librarian dreadnought's more your flavour, fair enough. I don't know anyone who doesn't take Wings of Sanguinius. You wouldn't not take Wings of Sanguinius. If you're a new Blood Angels player, take Wings of Sanguinius. Don't question it, just do it, okay? And for me, Wings, despite the changes, despite the minor nerf, despite the heartbreak when the book first came out, it maintains its status as a 5 out of 5 because it can't not be, because it's so essential to the way our psychers operate. So, arguments. It could be a 4 out of 5. It should be a 4 out of 5. But how can you not have it as an auto? How can you not give this great heralded power that allows for so much murder time, so much face smashing? How can you not give the Wings of Sanguinius 5 out of 5? How very dare you even think it, you heretic? So, I have fought on worlds wreathed in perpetual darkness, where unclean monsters crawled from the slime in their millions. I have fought across blazing sky cities as they fell from the heavens, and battled heretic mind witches in the depths of their twisted sanctums. I have locked blades with orc warriors so strong they could crush ceramite with their fists, dual traitors whose blades moved faster than thought, and slain howling abominations the size of tanks. Through all of it, I've learned to hold one truth above all others. Our strength flows from the Primarch, and he who venerates Sanguinius above all else will never be defeated. Veteran Sergeant Corporal, Blood Angels 1st Company. It's just a nice bit of fluff tagged onto the bottom of the Sanguinary Discipline. Is it a coincidence? No, I don't think so. Of course, it's tempting to take the Librarius discipline. There's cool powers in the Librarius, and it allows you to copy tactics from other chapters. But for me, I would never not take the Sanguinary Discipline. Sanguinary Discipline till I die. So let me know what you think in the comments section below. As always, I absolutely find your feedback and your input and your ideas on tactics and suggestions for units just absolutely invaluable. So I think I'll call this video there. I hope you found